Welcome back to DS Trucks. In today's video, I want to talk about one of the most overlooked maintenance items on your truck, and that is the brake fluid. Now, looking here at this reservoir, I believe these Ford trucks, the late model Ford trucks, take a .4 brake fluid, and this is one of those things that often gets overlooked. It is recommended from a lot of manufacturers that you change your brake fluid every 2 years. I don't know if that's the recommendation from Ford. I believe Ford just recommends changing it when it's required and recommends regular testing. Now, the thing about brake fluid is you really don't need to top it off because as the brake pads wear down, the brake fluid goes down, and if you change the brake pads, well, then the calipers will become more compressed and the brake fluid level will rise up. So it wouldn't be a good idea for me to actually top off this brake fluid to this max line, which is right here, because if I were to top this brake fluid off, then the brake fluid will be at the max line. But the next time you change out the brake pads, when you compress in the calipers, now your brake fluid is going to overflow. And once your brake fluid overflows, you're introducing more contaminants inside of the system because it's overflowing, and the dirt and grit on the outside of the cap will inadvertently be in contact with the fluid and flow into the system. So that would probably cause some damage. It's also recommended to clean the cap before you remove it. So we're going to do that because we're going to actually test this fluid. We want to know if it's true that the brake fluid goes bad after 2 years of service. Not necessarily that it totally goes bad, but the idea is that it absorbs 2% of moisture every year that it's in service when it's in the proper system, because the brake fluid itself is hygroscopic. It does absorb moisture from the air. So just the time in service and the environment and all that stuff combined, the amount of humidity and all that, the amount of driving that you're doing, uh, according to everything we've been told, that has an effect on the life of the brake fluid. Now, the reality is most vehicle owners do not change their brake fluid. I know it's pretty rare. For me, I've done it a few times to some older vehicles that I've had that really got higher up in the miles where it was apparent that it needed a brake fluid change. But most vehicle owners, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe some of you who watch this channel actually do things by the book and how it's supposed to be done, but most people do not think about the brake fluid that much. But when you really get into the technical data and the technical recommendations and the specifications of the fluid and how much moisture absorbed, and the fact that once it absorbs moisture and the heat hits the system, and that moisture can potentially boil and ultimately lowering the boiling point of the fluid, and then it boils and introduces air into the hydraulic circuit, and you have brake fade. And that's the last thing that you want when you're in a Super Duty towing a big trailer behind you. So let me go ahead and grab something to clean off the cap, because we want to do things right. And then we'll clean off the cap and we will go ahead and test our brake fluid. Now, this tester is from King Bolin, and I want to thank them for sending this to me. And I do want to apologize because I accidentally ran this thing over with my truck when I was testing the battery tester that they sent to me. I'm very grateful that they sent it to me because we've just put a set of Motorcrafts in the truck, and it was very interesting to test the old batteries that came out of here, which we got 5 years out of those batteries. I'm very happy that we did that. Now, going over to our brake fluid, let me grab the wipes to clean that up, just to minimize the chance that any of that grit can get in there. It's very little, just a little bit of sandiness on the outside of it, but I want to be thorough and make sure that we do things right. So let me grab the wipes real quick. So ideally, I would like to use brake or alcohol wipes, but instead I just have a little brake clean that I can just spray on there real quickly to just get the loose dirt off of it. And from there, let me get rid of this. From here, I'm just going to take a paper towel and just clean around there real fast just to dry that up and to remove any type of dust that can fall in there. Not super critical if you just do it real slow and take it off nicely. not a big deal if you don't do this, if it's not real dirty. Like if it's real dusty and dirty, then you want to get that loose stuff off, because you don't want that getting in there, getting into that master cylinder, and ultimately could potentially work its way through the system. So let's be smart about it and just give it a little quick cleaning. And keep in mind, opening this cap should be done in a minimalistic type of way. You don't want to be opening this up and leaving it off for an hour, because that lets more air into the system. You want to just open it up and put the cap back on there. Now for me, when I service my brake pads, I take this cap like this and I turn it loose like that. Now take it, loosen it, and once it's loose, I take it like that and I set it back down. When it's set down on there, I'm minimizing the amount of air that's in the system, but I'm allowing the calipers to push the extra air out of this reservoir, because once I compress all the calipers in, this fluid, because it's a closed system, should rise back up to the max line. So that is why I close this up. But you can see in here, what's interesting that I've just noticed is when you really look in there, let's turn this camera, you can see that there's water driplets. If you can see that, if it wants to focus, I know I can see it with my eye, but there's driplets, there's condensation all up in here, like toward the top. It's like it's moisture in there. And look at that. You can see some dust here, or some black kind of dirt around that lip. Hopefully I've got enough resolution to show you that, but it does appear that there's grit still around those threads, like almost like, because the rubber seal is in the top, it's sealed up there, but it's getting dirt around the threads of there's a little bit of micro dirt even still after cleaning this up. Very interesting. So let's go ahead and get our tester and see if it works. Now if this doesn't work, that's not on King Bowline, that's on me, because this one got ran over. But I was gonna go ahead and just order a new one, but I was like, dang, I just hit it with my truck, I drove over it, but it ain't that bad. Like just the back cover broke. So I'm gonna try and see if I can still use this thing to test this fluid. But King Bowline, sorry if you were watching this. So this is clean, uncontaminated tip here. I'm gonna dip this thing in here and see what happens. Is it in there? Is there some kind of strainer in there? Hold on. There's a strainer in there. Wait 1 second. So there's no strainer in there, but you can't get in there. There's a diversion where you can't get into the brake fluid. So I got to figure out how I'm going to get this thing to actually contact the brake fluid. Give me 1 second. So what I'm going to try to do is harvest some of this brake fluid into this vacuum pump that is for brakes, and I'm going to go ahead and just reach in there and get some out, and I'll have to top it back off. We're not at our minimum mark anyway, so one of the things about brake fluid is you have to clean off anything before you put it in there. We're gonna clean this off. I did find the alcohol wipes, so we're gonna clean off this, stick it in. The alcohol, you can't introduce alcohol into the braking system either, as well as water cannot be introduced. Alcohol cannot be introduced either, but the alcohol is used to wipe off the tube and it evaporates, and then we can dip it in there. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so clean end going in, quick wipe off with the isopropyl alcohol wipe. Let that dry off in the air just a little bit. Air dries, it's evaporating pretty quickly because it's alcohol. And we're gonna open up our cap and see if this will work. I'm not even sure, there's so many baffles down in there. I'm not even sure if this would work, but we'll stick that in there and see if we can't get anything out so that we can test our conditions. So looking up in there, oh yeah, we can drop this down into our fluid. So this would be a good way to flush the system. Just to get the fluid out of the reservoir, you could vacuum it out with something like this. We'll take a little sample. And what's cool is you could take this out and top it back off, and that would help the system. But ultimately, you still want to flush all the lines, and this tool could actually do that. Okay. I believe that is going to be enough. Another thing I noticed is if you're vacuuming your system out, this thing will flow backwards if you don't clean. Like I just did that long suction and pull in air. And if I didn't do that, it would flow backwards. So gravity wants to pull down. So we'll set that aside. Did an extra suction. I'll probably go ahead and do some more suction on that just to get any old residuals out of that tube. And we're going to go ahead and resecure our lid here to minimize any chances of contamination or anything like that. And then we can go ahead and test the brake fluid. Moment of truth. I'm super curious if this will work. Here's our sample of fluid here, and I got the tester. Nothing's happening just yet. I believe you just dip this thing in here. And it's telling me a reading. Look at that. King Bolin, if I'm saying that right. It's giving us a reading. And it's saying, it might be saying that this fluid's still good. What's it saying? Okay, do I have to press another button? So if it's .5, it really depends on .3, .4. They give me the same reading. Oh, okay. So if this is a .4 brake, we're less than 0.5% water, according to this tool. Very interesting. So the fluid visually looks good, and it's testing good. So when they say your brake fluid absorbs moisture, what are they really saying? Because this is telling me that after 5 years, we're still in the ballpark of we're good. We're not in the okay. The okay would be a little bit more moisture. We're not in the warning. Now, that being said, if we make it to a .5.1, which I'd have to look, I don't think this is a 5.1 brake fluid. But for .5.1, we're kind of teetering in the okay range. We're still not in the warning range for 5.1. So this tells me that this does not perform like a 5.1. And it could be that, I mean, honestly, let me go look real quick and see what kind of fluid this truck takes. I can't remember if it's 4 or 5.1. So a quick search online revealed to me that .3, .4, .5.1 are all going to be compatible, with 5.1 being the highest performance one out there, the newest one out there. .3 is something that would have been used in older vehicles, but .4 is what supersedes .3. And from my quick search online, it revealed to me that the Super Duties call for .4. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a lot of information to remember, so I kind of forget about all these different fluids. So it does require a bit of a refresher from time to time. But the .5 brake fluid would be the synthetic brake fluid that's used on different type of systems, and it's not to be mixed with .3, .4, or .5.1, where these three ones have a different base. I don't want to say it wrong, but whatever the material, the base material is that makes these standard old school brake fluids, they're all compatible. So if you were to mix, say, .3 with .5.1, then you'd ultimately probably land somewhere in a .4 range, as you're bringing down the performance of that 5.1, but you probably bring it up the performance of that 4 point, of that 3 to a 4. So in theory, it wouldn't damage the system if it were upgraded to a 5.1 from a 3 or 4. But then again, we don't know if that system is designed for that type of brake fluid and still perform how it was performing with the 3 or with the 4 or whatever. So I guess the moral of that whole deal is just use what's recommended. I cannot remember if the Super Duties go up to a 5.1 or not, but from the quick search online, it kind of points to the idea that it is a 4. But even still, you can't trust online. You got to look in the book. And I didn't have time to really look in the book because I got some stuff that I got to hurry up and do. So if I were doing a brake flush on a Super Duty right now, I would definitely have to look in the book to confirm whether or not it takes a 4. This one says only use .4 right there on the cap. There you go. This one says only use .4 brake fluid in the truck. So .4 it is on this one. And that means that our testing belongs into a .4. So when they say the brake fluid absorbs all this moisture per year, we're right at the edge here. So we're in 5.1. We're not even failing for a 5.1. We're kind of in the okay still for 5.1 if that glare doesn't show. But when we go over to .3, we're okay. And .4, we're okay at less than 0.5% moisture. So what gives? Should I put some water in this thing to see if it, a little bit of water should throw it off. Let's go ahead and add some water to this and see if it will fail the test at that point. Let's do that. All right, so I just poured some water, like a good squirt of water in there. I should have showed that, but I didn't on the camera. But trust and believe, I just poured water in here. Let's test the fluid now. And it's freaking going up to 3%. So I'll show you. I gotta go back and show you how much water I put in this thing. So I'm gonna float this right here. And another thing to mention, if you don't know, I have to say this: brake fluid is a paint thinner. So if you put it on your paint, it'll rip your paint off. And if you accidentally ever get it on your paint, pour cold water on it, and it will prevent your paint from being ruined. Because it does take a minute for it to strip paint. So, I'll show you. I didn't show, but now I gotta show you how much freaking water I put in there in order to get this thing. I turned on the water real lightly like this, just real slow, and I added like that. I just did that real quick, and that's what I did, and it went crazy after it starts beeping at me like, dude, what are you doing? There's water in there. So what's interesting too is it being hydroscopic. It's not like oil, it's not like diesel, or diesel's hydroscopic too, where diesel can pull moisture out of the air and stuff, but diesel's also hydrophobic at the same time. So when water gets in diesel, it tends to separate. If you let it sit over time and all that, the water can come out of the diesel, even though small parts of the water can be in the diesel, like microscopic water driplets can be suspended in the diesel. Diesel, while it's hydroscopic, it's hydrophobic too at the same time. So water can get into diesel from the air, but it settles to the bottom of the diesel and it separates itself eventually. Whereas this product, when water goes into it, it just now it's looking kind of watery because I went crazy. So yeah, it's looking watery now. So let's dip it in there. And it's straight up telling you like, dude, there ain't something. This ain't right. It's telling you like, dude, this ain't right. .5, even worse. And it's not happy. And .3 seems okay, interestingly enough. .4, .5, .3 we're not ringing, but it's still really high in the water content. So all in all, let's move this thing so we don't get it wet. I'm not sure if you can clean this with brake cleaner or not, but all in all, I have to say that this tool does work. It's reading water in your brake fluid. And furthermore, being that this truck is 5 years old and brake fluid's hydroscopic and it absorbs moisture and all that, honestly, from our testing with this tool from King Bowden, which they make good stuff. I mean, it's cheap, affordable tools, but it does work. It's telling us that no, the brake fluid did not absorb all that water per year. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't. Meaning that if I left brake fluid open somewhere on a shelf in a container with the lid open, maybe it would absorb all that water per year. But being that these systems have gotten better compared to the past, maybe that is something that's being carried over that maybe isn't as much of an issue as it used to be with the new rubber seals and stuff that we have on our caps, with our diaphragms that are on here. When you look at this cap and you remove it, you know, this diaphragm here will drop down just a little bit to allow for air movement when the system needs that movement for whatever reason. So the cap's on there tight, and I am surprised to find that no, after 5 years of service, the fluid looked clean. It's not testing water. We added water to the fluid. Now it's beeping. Back in the day, though, back in 92, 93, these systems were different. You know, this is a modern system with modern O-rings and good seals, probably pretty airtight. But back in the day, they used to have a very different reservoir design with a clamp and a big rubber thing that maybe let more air into it. Whereas this system seems to not be letting moisture at all into the system. So is it a waste of money? Being that the fluid would look good, you can see it in there. It's been this truck's 5 years old. It's been used. It's been plowing snow. It's been plowing snow. So it's been in the moist environment for sure. Rainy here in Michigan. It's been rainy. It doesn't appear to have gained enough water to necessarily warrant a brake fluid change. We could throw a set of brake pads on here, compress the calipers, bring the fluid level back up, and send it again. Should be fine, according to King Bolin. So maybe, you know, I don't see any problems with their equipment and all their stuff that I've tested so far. Their scan tools for check engine lights, their battery tester has been great. They all seem to work, so there's no reason to believe that their brake fluid tester is not accurate or anything like that. And like we said, we added water. It tested for water. It seems to be able to tell when there's water in the system. So very impressed with King Bolin. Again, the price point for their tools. If you're just a guy like me, I got a couple trucks. We plow snow. I need to be able to test these things on the fly. So brake fluid, I want to be able to test that real quick, and I don't want to spend $300 on a tool. King Bolin, they come in, I think, at like $30, but double check to confirm that price. But like $30, you can get their tool, and it can get the job done. Little teeny tiny battery tester, very nice to have. So anyway, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. My name is Sean. This is DS Trucks. Thank you for tuning in. See you in the next video. Over and out.